Chapter 6. The Unknown Recruit. The two girls arrived at the long driveway that led into the woods. There was a mailbox right beside the beat dirt path that led to the base. Alea turned to Lila and said, "You go ahead, Lila. I'll catch up. I'm just going to check the mail real fast." Lila shrugged and kept walking down the driveway as Alea walked over to the black, rust-covered mailbox. She opened the front, and the hinges squeaked loudly. Alea said to herself, "Geez, Sam really needs to fix this mailbox." She closed the door to the mailbox. There was no mail to collect. Then, Alea felt a strange presence, like someone was watching her. She whipped around and glanced at her surroundings. There was nothing but trees, the sidewalk, the road, and the driveway. She shrugged to herself and turned back to begin her walk down the driveway. A wave of urge made her scrunch her shoulders to her neck and close her eyes. She had an overwhelming urge to go into the forest to her left. She couldn't remember ever feeling this way before, but it felt strangely familiar. Alea had a little promise she made to herself the day she and the humans were attacked by Rebay. Always trust your instincts. Alea knew that her team would be worried if she didn't get back to base soon, but the urge was too strong. Thus, Alea jumped the ditch that was between her and the forest and started to venture in. Eventually, she came to an area that was not quite a clearing, but the trees were very spaced out. The urge stopped, and so did Alea. She was confused, thinking she had lost her mind, and was about to go back when she felt the urge come back. This time, however, it wasn't telling her to go anywhere. It was a fight or flight response, and, as she was now known for, she picked fight. Alea changed back into Saberclaw in the blink of an eye and activated her blasters. "Reveal yourself," she yelled into the forest. The trees were so spaced out she knew she would be able to see any enemy easily, but the canopy of leaves above her was not the same. She was whirling around looking for who she was going to blast when she felt a large weight drop onto her head. It knocked her down easily, and she lay on her back. She opened her eyes to see a shadow standing on top of her, pinning her down. It had a broad, strong-looking frame. It also had glowing blue eyes that looked like hers, but they were less round and were sharper, more masculine. She made eye contact with it, and its eyes softened. Her eyes were wide as she couldn't see anything but its silhouette as the light from the now broken canopy shone upon her attacker. It had a very masculine body shape that, once again, looked familiar. Her core began to heat up as that fuzzy feeling returned. However, Callum was nowhere nearby. Why was this feeling coming back? The attacker seemed to be in an offensive position until it got a good look at her and relaxed. "Didn't expect to see you here," it said plainly with a semi-deep, masculine voice that rang bells in Saberclaw's memory. Why did this attacker seem so familiar? The enemy relaxed, and Saberclaw took the initiative. She threw it off of her with incredible force, and he was launched into a nearby large oak tree. It grunted on impact, but now Saberclaw could see it clearly. The attacker stood with its knees bent, barely keeping itself upright as it braced its large body against the tree. He was very clearly male, and he had the same jawline and facial features that Callum did, but he was a robot. He was painted blue and seemed so familiar it made Saberclaw's head hurt as she tried to remember where she had seen him before. She shook her head and got rid of the millions of thoughts swirling in her head. Saberclaw looked at him as he recovered. "Who are you?" she demanded loudly. He met her eyes, but smiled instead of glared. His smile made her feel warm, but also sick at the same time. She didn't know how to react to these emotions, so she did the only thing she knew how to do in this situation: attack. She lunged at him with impeccable speed and swung. She punched the tree. "What?" she quietly asked herself, and quickly looked to the side once she dislodged her fist from its bark. She saw her attacker staring at her longingly. He could have hit her then, easily, in fact, but he didn't, and that confused Saberclaw even more. He was so close, but didn't dare hit her. Weird. She used her opposite hand and punched him while he was still dazed. He stumbled backward. "You are just as feisty and strong as Rebay described." He wiped blue-green liquid off his upper lip. "Rebay," she considered this, then continued. "You work for her? Who are you? Some kind of assassin?" she barked as he put his hands up in surrender. She pointed her blaster at his head, right in between his eyes. He looked at the blaster and backed up with a surprised, but somewhat impressed expression. He seemed smug as well. Saberclaw should have shot him, but something inside her told her not to. He saw her hesitate, and all of his concern for his life must have vanished because he did a respectful, but sarcastic and exaggerated bow to her. "My name is Lockjaw, loyal servant to Queen Rebay, and a really cool guy. Also, I am sworn to kill you because it is Her Highness's wishes, so I guess I should." He proved he had been going easy on her this whole time because he lunged at her almost faster than she could react. He used the same hold Ironstripe had used when he and Saberclaw had first met, but instead of in midair, he pinned her to a tree. She struggled and kicked and grabbed his hand, desperately trying to force his hand off of her, but did this in vain. However, something is telling me not to. Interesting. He moved his body closer to Saberclaw as she struggled against his strength. He got close enough for his head to almost touch hers. She now realized how much taller he was than her. He was shorter than Ironstripe, definitely, but was undoubtedly taller than her. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself? What did you do to anger the most gracious Nexthari leader?" he asked her in a hushed voice. He was taunting her. This really ticked Saberclaw off. How could he be so similar to her, but so loyal to that which of a creature? She thought this to herself as she felt anger bubbling inside her. Her metal face scrunched as she yelled at him and took advantage of this anger. She used her legs to kick him in the chest, and he let go of her due to the force. She executed a perfect backflip and braced herself against the oak tree. Lockjaw stumbled backwards, clutching his chest. Bingo! There was his weak spot. Ironstripe had taught Saberclaw to always find and take out the weak spot in your opponent during battle. She jumped off of the tree, finally, and landed on Lockjaw's torso, pushing him to the ground. As soon as he hit the dirt, Saberclaw punched his chest with all her might. He cried out in pain, but didn't lose any strength. He grabbed her arms tightly and rolled over where, instead of her on top of him, he was on top of her. He tilted his head as he asked, "Seriously, though, what did you do? I am very curious." He was acting like this was a regular conversation. Saberclaw took a lot of offense from that, but figured she would tell him to try to waver his loyalty a little. She started thinking of how much damage he could do to Rebay. Never mind that. She wanted to tell him her side of this violent story. "She attacked me, you idiot. She wants to kill every living being on this planet," she yelled. She stopped struggling suddenly and smiled at him. He heard the clicking of a loaded weapon. She became arrogant and gained a taunting tone in her voice. "Now, you're going to want to get off of me right now." His smug face disappeared as he looked down. He was holding her upper arms, but she still had room to activate her blasters apparently. She had a glowing plasma gun loaded, and so close to him that the barrel was touching his chest. "Now back off, slowly. Any sudden moves, and I will blow you back to your precious queen." He raised his hands again, just without the sarcasm. "All right, you win this time, Saberclaw." His face fell, and he looked a little angry. She smiled cruelly as he stood up and backed away, but she followed, keeping her blaster on his chest. "Now, you run home and tell Rebay that I said hello. Also, tell her to stay away from Earth or I won't just threaten to shoot you and her entire army. Am I clear? Also, what do you know my name?" She tilted her head and looked up to him with her green eyes as menacing slits. "First question, yes, ma'am. She will kill you and conquer your planet easily, but, hey, I don't make the rules. Second question, I hear Her Highness ranting about you all the time. Of course I know your name." He answered, and his eyes softened again as he seemed to look directly into Saberclaw's core. She felt her armored face heat up as his face got closer. "You know, Saber, I won't tell Rebay what you said, so she might spare your life. You know what? I have a better idea. I won't tell her I even met you because I enjoyed our little meeting here. You are a lot more tempting than you realize. I hope you understand that. You ought to be more careful from now on, Saberclaw." She was hypnotized by his body language and tone. Lockjaw just called her tempting. What is that supposed to mean? Thoughts like this ran through her mind, and it distracted her. She lowered her weapon without realizing, and he used this to inflict more confusion upon her. He lightly touched, and lifted her chin so she would look at him. He smiled slyly and raised his hand. Clutched tightly in his hand was a dart. It had a bright, sickly green liquid in it that bubbled. It had a feathered end and a large needle on the other end. She tilted her head slowly and gave a puzzled face before the dart, and his hand zipped out of her line of vision. She gasped as she felt a sharp pain in her side, and she saw him smirk before he let her head fall. She looked down at the side of her lower torso and saw the dart sticking out of her. Then she looked up at him again and asked, "What?" She trailed off as the last thing she saw before passing out was Lockjaw walking off in the forest and taking off flying through the canopy with his large blue wings. "Saberclaw, can you hear me?" Saberclaw heard Silver Spot ask sternly as her vision slowly returned and cleared. She looked around to see Lila on top of her, looking intensely into Saber's optics. Her optics are responding. She's awake. Saberclaw heard Silver Spot say again as Lila let out a relieved sigh. Saberclaw remembered what had happened and sat up abruptly. "Lockjaw!" she yelled, still in the moment before she lost consciousness. Lila, who was apparently standing on Saber's face, fell. Saberclaw saw this and snapped back to reality, quickly placing her hand under Lila, catching her in her palm before she hit the ground. Saberclaw was staring into nothing, taking in her surroundings. The dart must have simply knocked her out because Saberclaw felt fine and was sitting in the same place as when she fought Lockjaw. "Saber, who's Lockjaw?" Silver Spot asked cautiously. "And why were you out here with this Nextherian dart stuck in you?" Silver Spot was holding the dart. All of its green liquid was gone, except for maybe one drop. "Yeah, I was about to ask that too," Lila said as Saberclaw set her down on the ground. "I don't know what happened. I was checking the mail when I had an urge to go into the woods," and Saberclaw began, but was interrupted by Lila. "And you followed it?" "That is how horror movies start." Saberclaw ignored Lila and looked directly at Silver Spot as she kept talking. The green robot continued. "There was another, like us, but he was very loyal to Rebay and tried to kill me. We fought for a little while, and then he said weird things to me that made me feel the way Callum made me feel." She looked down as the place where Lockjaw had stabbed her with the dart with a little bit of guilt. Lila's eyes went wide as she remembered. "Oh, that Callum. Wait, that doesn't make any sense." Silver Spot looked puzzled once she heard these things. She still hadn't been informed about Callum, but she temporarily ignored it. Silver Spot shook her head and cleared her suspicious thoughts as she spoke. "I'm guessing those feelings distracted you, and he stabbed you with this?" She held up the dart. Saberclaw nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, he was painted blue and sounded just like Callum as well. It's probably me losing my mind, though." Silver Spot put her hand under her chin, very clearly confused. She thought about these events, and all she found were dead, and since she didn't know who this Callum was. Although, she could tell he was an important character. Lila saw this and casually explained, "Callum is her crush from school, by the way." Saberclaw wanted to object, but it was true, so she just pouted silently. Silver Spot's face showed recognition, showing that she understood. "Well, there was no Lockjaw before Iron Stripe and I escaped. Maybe he's a new recruit. Anyway, we can figure out who this phantom robot is later. Right now I need to get you back to base, so I can get a better look at you and make sure the dart only made you pass out." Silver Spot offered her hand to help Saberclaw stand, and she grabbed it. Saberclaw also reached out and grabbed Lila as Silver Spot lifted her. She placed Lila on her shoulder, and Lila sat, completely trusting her friend. The three of them walked back to the base. They walked for about 5 minutes before reaching the large garage door that opened and let them into the base's main room. Iron Stripe was talking to Mr. Carolee, and the scientist was shifting nervously. Mr. Carolee looked over and saw Silver Spot and Saberclaw walk in. Lila was still sitting on Saberclaw's shoulder, so Saberclaw kneeled down and let Lila get off of her. Sam ran over to her and hugged her. It was clear that he was worried for his daughter's safety. Silver Spot walked over to Iron Stripe and hugged him tightly and sincerely. He returned this act of affection as if he hadn't touched her in years. She ended the hug and looked at him longingly. Then she walked away from him towards Saberclaw. Iron Stripe watched her walk away with a satisfied smile on his face. Silver Spot called to Saberclaw. Come on, let's go put this dart under a microscope and get you a proper checkup. Sam, I could use your help. Saberclaw and Sam followed Silver Spot through another door that led them into the hallway. Lila and Iron Stripe were curious, so they followed. They walked into a room that had words lasered into the metal above the frame of the entrance to the room. The words said, Lab and Medical Bay. When Silver Spot walked in, countless machines turned on and began making electronic sounds. The machines were lined up around the walls, and 2 medical beds were set up in the middle of the room with a large light shining overhead. Silver Spot spoke without turning around as she walked over to a complex-looking microscope. Saber, sit on one of those medical beds while I grab something to scan you with. And Sam, I need you to come check this out for me. She gestured toward the microscope as she walked over to a custom-made, large tool chest. Silver Spot pulled out one of the shelves in the tool chest and picked up a portable scanner out of it. Sam walked over and climbed up a ladder that took him to the microscope. Silver Spot, still holding the device, walked past Sam as he looked into the microscope. She approached Saberclaw and activated the device. A beam of light spread from the scanner, and, as Silver Spot waved it over Saberclaw's body, didn't make a sound. Apparently, that was good because Silver Spot stayed relaxed the whole time and eventually put the scanner back in its place. So, am I good to go? Saberclaw asked with a bit of boredom in her voice. Silver Spot nodded, so Saberclaw stood up and walked over to Sam and the microscope as Lila and Iron Stripe calmly watched from the doorway. So what's the litter sticker hiding? Saberclaw asked with a suppressed laugh. She turned to Lila, who was also giggling. See what I did there? She asked, causing Lila to laugh harder. Sam rolled his eyes and answered, all that is in this thing is a bunch of some sort of depressant drugs. It's nothing special, but it definitely isn't from Earth. Silverspit walked over to him and sighed. That's what I thought too. Thanks for looking at it. He answered no problem. Silverspit thought for a moment as she said, it's unusual though. No normal recruit would be carrying a dart like that around. This made Sam suspicious, so he asked, Recruit? What happened anyway? Silverspot shrugged. Oh, nothing unusual. Saberclaw just got ambushed by what we suspect is a cocky recruit. But recruits aren't allowed to have chemical weapons like this. Sam started thinking as well. Silverspot turned to Saberclaw finally. Do you remember anything else about this lockjaw fellow? She asked. Saberclaw had to think back. The way he fought her like it was nothing. The way he stole her gaze whenever he spoke. The way his eyes softened when he looked at her. She couldn't tell Silverspot any of this. She answered Silverspot's question. He kept calling Rebay gracious and crap like that. He also seemed really familiar. Silverspot huffed after Saberclaw spoke. So, you keep saying, she pondered for a moment. Well, that doesn't help us at all. She concluded as Sam and Lila yawned at the same time. Iron Stripe looked up at the clock on the wall and said, it is getting late. If Saberclaw is all right and the dart isn't dangerous, can we just call it a day and figure this out tomorrow? Silverspot sighed. Yeah, you're right. Sam, Lila, how about you two turn in for the night? Both of you look exhausted. The 2 humans nodded in agreement silently and walked out, dragging their tired feet. Iron Stripe did the same for some reason, although his exit was more of a run than a walk. Saberclaw was confused. Whenever Iron Stripe actually reminded the humans that it was time for them to get their nightly rest, he immediately started talking about the Sentiron's nightly activities. She shrugged to herself. He may have just needed to clear his head, but he didn't return for the rest of the night. What do you mean you found nothing? Rebay screeched as she threw a piece of furniture into the wall. She was in her warship's control room, and the planet she wanted to take over was just below the large spaceship. She was receiving a report from one of her sentries on Earth. She had recently turned him from an enemy to a loyal soldier through persuasion. Of course, this persuasion could also be considered gaslighting and mind control, but that didn't matter to the queen of the next Hari. His name was Lockjaw, and he had been on Earth for a couple weeks and still not come across anything that had to do with her current quarry. Lockjaw, I'm starting to think that you are concealing some sort of information for me. Rebay glared at him as he bowed in front of her. He looked slightly nervous as he spoke. I wouldn't dream of hiding anything from you, my wonderful queen. His voice cracked a little, and he awaited her answer. She was about to yell at him when a voice echoed through the room. Ribe, I have successfully gained their trust. Ribe looked up to see a shadow of a creature leaning on the doorframe of the door that led into the control room. Ribe sighed angrily and then composed herself again. That's Queen Ribe to you. Finally, some good news. Did the shadow killer complete its assignment? She asked, annoyed. The being's eyes glowed, but the rest of its body was concealed by a dark shadow. No, it barely failed, but why was that killing machine in our escape pod? It asked with a hint of anger in its voice. Ribe's face was smug. I couldn't let a perfect transportation opportunity go to waste now, could I? She taunted. The mysterious, concealed creature looked confused for a minute, and Ribe knew exactly why. Ribe smirked and explained. As you know, I run a very tight ship here. Do you really think that you and your partner escaped me? I'll let you go, idiot. She waited for his answer with an arrogant attitude. The being snarled. That could have killed her. It ignored her shocking explanation for now. It began to speak, but was silenced by Ribe. Lockjaw, you are dismissed. She waved Lockjaw off, and he walked out as she continued to speak with her mysterious ally. And you know that it was programmed only to kill Saberclaw. You should understand that I won't kill your oblivious lover. She teased once more.